And yet, as much as his hospitalization occurred and it was a serious and critical need for his recovery, he was in the ICU for a portion of time. He and the doctors are convinced that the vaccination ultimately saved his life in lessening the impact of the Delta variant. Our mobile site vaccination process is in the final planning stages. It will begin next week at each of the area stations around the city. We're scheduling the logistics of it so that the convenience will be for officers that are working overnight shift or the day shift will have the ability to sign up and be vaccinated at their workplace rather than being required to go to a private physician. There are currently citywide vaccination sites for city employees, and the department is hosting one of those sites tomorrow, which will also afford members of the department to have ready access to this vaccine. We continue to stress the need for it as a life-saving measure for themselves as well as their family members and the public in which we serve. Mask requirements as well as other personal protective initiatives are in play and will continue for the foreseeable future as we work through this pandemic. As we're seeing in the county, with more than 1,500 now individuals hospitalized and the rate of infection significantly increased, all of us need to ensure that our efforts are to take personally our protective measures, vaccinated or not, to ensure that we can overcome this surge that we've recently seen. Reporting on significant events and instances, I'm going to take the moment to just thank our elected officials and our communities throughout Los Angeles that made the National Night Out last Tuesday such a success. I know, and I want to thank Commissioner Kalanchi for visiting, I believe, 3 different sites here in the city. I visited a couple sites myself and was impressed by the safety measures that were in place. There was, whether it was food or distancing, protective masks were employed. But at the same time, we saw communities come out en masse, supported many times by council offices as well as other electeds to come out and encourage as well as provide booth space. We saw food giveaways, information pamphlets, a referral for services, grid resources that were there. I had a great opportunity to speak with 4 different grid contractors, gang reduction interventionists in Newton Division, and hear essentially their discussions about what their work is in the streets and how they back each other up, and yet they come from rival gangs of a lifetime ago. But their life's commitment today is to ensure every effort is done to quell this increase in street violence and to save lives by avoiding the spiral of gang violence that too often we see in our communities. Captain Lopez at Rampart or Captain Baez, both of them, they invested their time and energy to ensure that the community felt supported, and they had a great opportunity to exchange information and see each other and hear each other. The other matter, a couple other matters I attended. I want to thank Chief Regina Scott for South Bureau's Community Police Academy that was held beginning the second meeting actually was last Wednesday in the evening. It is a virtual meeting to ensure COVID compliance, where the attendees, I think there was 25 plus of them, I gave some brief remarks and entertained some questions, but they all largely were there to understand our complaint investigation process, to understand both the investigation as well as the adjudication of employee misconduct and allegations of that, as well as to hear from our Major Crimes Division how our investigations go regarding hate crimes, and as well as our joint investigations with a number of our federal partners, whether it be for human trafficking or narcotic trafficking or other serious crimes that threaten the safety of our communities. Last Friday, I want to thank Mr. Richard Tiefang for appearing at our detention officer graduation ceremony. It was the first that we've had this year. It was an opportunity to welcome 14 new detention officers to the organization, as well as their families and friends, and to welcome them to our home, the Los Angeles Police Academy, and provide some brief remarks about both their accomplishments as well as wishing them the best as they start a new career with LAPD as detention officers. On Saturday, the Dream Center joined with the Kershaw Foundation and Justin Turner and the LA Dodgers and LAPD where we were able to attend a large community event where thousands of backpacks were handed out to needy children, at-risk families that had an opportunity not just to enjoy a community fair and food and some entertainment, but needed school supplies as all of our children here in Los Angeles have begun their school attendance this week. Lastly, I attended a West Valley community event Captain David Grimes organized with our Los Angeles Task Force for Regional Auto Theft, that's called the TRAP, to have a community event where the markings were put on catalytic converters as a means of deterring those thefts. While we have an overall reduction in burglary and theft from vehicles, we've seen a significant increase this past year in catalytic converter thefts. It's a ordeal that it's very expensive to the vehicle owner. It costs them thousands of dollars to repair their vehicle. West Valley alone has seen more than 400 of these catalytic converter thefts this year alone. And so this ingenuity by some senior lead officers to come up with a means of which to mark those catalytic converters to deter thieves from taking those in an effort to resell them to our metal scrap yards and salvagers. It's that type of ingenuity and partnering with our community that I believe will make lasting impacts on crime and the safety of our communities across Los Angeles. At this time, I want to talk about we had a single categorical use of force, an officer-involved shooting that involved a no-hit this past week. It happened on the 6th of August at approximately 8:30 in the morning. And there at that time, North Hollywood uniformed patrol officers were in the 6700 block of Vantage Avenue when they were flagged down by a community member reporting an altercation between a male and female in a nearby parking lot. The officers approached the location by assessing an alleyway to the rear of the 12100 block of Van Owen Street. And there they observed a male individual later identified as a Roberto de la Cruz, male Hispanic, 41 years of age, and allegedly armed with a handgun. Mr. de la Cruz allegedly pointed that handgun at one of the officers, which resulted in an officer-involved shooting. Mr. de la Cruz then threw his firearm onto a nearby rooftop as he ran east through an alley towards Laurel Canyon. After a short foot pursuit, he was taken into custody in front of an apartment complex located in the 6700 block of Laurel Canyon Boulevard. Mr. de la Cruz was not struck by gunfire, and no one else was injured during this incident. The handgun that was thrown was recovered from the scene, and no officers were injured. Force Investigations Division did respond and are investigating this incident, as well as the oversight of the Office of Inspector General and the Los Angeles District Attorney's officer-involved shooting rollout team. This makes our 24th officer-involved shooting this year versus 18 that we had experienced by this time last year. We've had 9 fatal officer-involved shootings versus 6 last year. And our 4-year average is just under 23 officer-involved shootings for the year, and 8.5 or between 8 and 9 fatals by this time of year for officer-involved shootings. Moving over to our crime statistics, this past week we see essentially an increase in shooting violence, 30 victims that were shot versus 23 the week before. As we look at the 4-week numbers for violent crime and property crime in Los Angeles, we have seen a slight reduction in the most current 4 weeks compared to the previous 4 weeks. But that rate of crime is still above last year at this time. So there has been some slowing effect, but not nearly the level that we need. We had 622 violent crimes for the week ending the 7th of August. Last week, the week before that, was 625. Last year, that number was 549. So these numbers that we're experiencing, 37 homicides in the last 28-day period versus 45 in the 28-day previous period, and a reduction in shooting victims from 128 in the previous 28-day period to 114. So an overall slight reduction. Our challenge continues to be shooting violence, homicides, persons experiencing homelessness, as well as those involved in street violence, as well as aggravated assaults. Our work and by our officers, as I've reported last week, and I'll continue, continues to be focusing on those areas where we see the increase in violent crime, as well as identifying the known offenders, and where our investigations identify who's responsible going out and making those arrests. This last week also was the beginning of our violent crime initiative to strengthen our strategies, our existing strategies, both in community engagement and outreach, as well as in added patrols for the apprehension of violent offenders. And we're already seeing results of that, where we're seeing increased footbeats, an increased presence in a number of our parks during summer night lights and other type of community outings, as well as the apprehension of people who are during traffic stops and investigative follow-up, identifying individuals that are possession of guns and also responsible for the shooting violence. Lastly, I'll move over to our personnel strength. We are now at 9,410 sworn personnel. That's as of the pay period ending July 31st, and 2,695 civilian members. As a matter of perspective, this year, critical to us is our ability to hire after nearly a year of a hiring freeze. We saw our numbers substantially reduced by more than 600 sworn personnel and 250 civilian personnel. Critical is our ability for applicants to understand that we're hiring qualified individuals and to go to join LAPD, to go to the city's employment site for a number of opportunities that exist within this department. These staffing levels are a challenge to us, as the last time we were at our sworn numbers at 9,410 was 2006. And the last time that we were at the civilian numbers was 2015. So operationally, these reduced numbers have reduced our options and reduced our availability on a number of strategies. In part, our violent crime focus for these 90 days is meant to strengthen some of those deployment numbers that have been weakened. But as we move forward, what's going to be critical is that working with the personnel department is that we identify, hire, and prepare for employment hundreds of personnel, both through our sworn and civilian ranks. So Angelinos, we look forward to you joining this department, making a difference and being part of that change. That concludes my remarks. I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Chief. Commissioners, questions for the Chief of Police? Questions, Commissioner Bonner.
Yes, just a couple, please. First, just working backwards, Chief, from the personnel numbers, I think you mentioned the 9,410 sworn officers and 2,695 civilians. With regard to the sworn officers, help me again understand that that's the number of officers that are currently sworn in on the workforce. Is that correct? The 9,410?
Yes.
Okay, and then you mentioned that I think it was 2016 or 2006 since you were at the authorized number. Is that what you were pointing out?
No, at that staffing number.
So you're saying that at 9,410 it hasn't been since 2006 since you were at that level.
That low of a staffing number.
Right. Okay. And what should it be just relative to what's authorized? If you were fully staffed up, what would that number be? So
the number, we're at where we should be on a hiring plan that was established with this council's, with the budget that was just passed. We dropped to 9,410 because of a lack of hiring over the past year. We dropped, and with the number we're desired at the end of this fiscal year to be is 9,706. The number we should be at, I would argue, is that we were at 10,100 just some 18, 19 months ago. And as a department of this size, serving a city of this size, and the need for public engagement, for our efforts to building public trust by having officers with available time and resources to meet the changing needs of Los Angeles, that the number should be higher than what's authorized. And as we build for the future of 2021 and beyond.
So again, so you said 9,706 is where you would be at the end of this fiscal year under the current hiring plan, if that all goes to plan. And then what is the 10,000 number? Is that that's the number that in your judgment where you should be staffed to carry out the mission?
So the idea in the reduction from 10,100 to 9,750, which was what last year's budget plan was to identify alternative services and then identify a means to offload, if you will, responsibilities that were previously and currently are being handled by the department, and that would allow a smaller workforce to deal with its core components. I think that what we're also seeing, though, is that as we look in the aftermath of the after action report, is that we need to invest more deeply in the training of all of our personnel. And that training previously was done on the fly in an existing of taking people from patrol and from investigative settings and putting them in training environments so as to build and maintain their skill sets. So in retrospect, as I look back on this now, I look and see that if we were to have those additional officers that we'd had just 2 years ago, we'd have additional staffing so that we could more readily do that type of in-service training. So it's critical that we be able to do in-service training, which requires a larger workforce. It's critical that we build on our community safety partnership and allow neighborhood level deployments so that officers have added time and resources to problem solve and attend neighborhood watch meetings and partner with communities on outreach and engagement, and not simply and not be required to instead prioritize their time for calls for service that need their presence. But the key here is to have sufficient staffing. It's called a split force versus a community policing model. And what that means is that officers have territorial imperative for an area, that they have sufficient time to handle the calls that naturally occur for the policing services in those areas, as well as time to work on problem solving efforts and partnerships and engagement with the community. That basic CAR plan, that type of policing, which LAPD has led the country in for decades, has been impacted by the staffing levels that we see today.
Okay, so just I think I understand it, but just recap briefly. So you're at the 94 10 right now, and what you're saying is the lowest level since 2006. If you had all of the positions filled that you're authorized to fill right now, you'd be at 9710 or 9706 or 9710, somewhere thereabout. But to achieve the split force model and do all the training, everything else that you're contemplating, you would really need to be at about 10,000 something.
Or higher. And the two things, let me be clear. The split force mentality, split force philosophy is you have officers that do problem solving, community engagement, and then you have response units. And it's a split force where officers, all they do is respond to calls. And then these other officers, all they do is community engagement. That's a wrong model in policing, because what we saw in the policing in the 80s when that happens is that officers, they don't solve problems. They just handle the call and then they move on to the next call. And so what we've learned in community policing over the last decades is that you need to have sufficient staff so that we have what's called the 740 plan, where officers respond in sufficient time to emergency calls, urgent calls, and routine calls, and have about 40% of their time that they can self-direct their activities. That's about 24 minutes an hour that they can actually have some time to do outreach and engagement and work on problems beyond just handling the immediate problem that's right before them. So in concert with that, we still need to, however, find ways in which resources other than police handle substantial numbers of calls that we currently are handling. I don't want to, this is a complex subject, and I don't want to pull away from the fact that mental health workers, the homeless outreach and engagement needs to be built, bolstered, and improved so there's a 24-hour-a-day presence of those resources. An effort that the city is engaging in with the new Circle project in Hollywood and Pacific, where by the end of this year, we'll have teams in the Hollywood and Pacific areas that are going to be that outreach and engagement, that non-armed response to these type of low-level matters. So we need a combination. It's a complex, public safety is a complex and shared responsibility engagement. I come into some of these conversations, don't mean to just do a hit and run on it, but as I give a response back, I want to make sure that we're being fair to all the competing interests of what we need to safely police and provide for the safety of the city.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And just to be clear, I don't, as I sit here today, I don't have any view one way or the other as to what the appropriate level is. So I'm still engaged in the effort of understanding not just the broad lay of the land, but also the trade-offs some of the trade-offs you've mentioned here today. And candidly, I think it's something that warrants an agenda item at some point in the future to simply focus on what you've described here this morning. I think in more detail than I've heard in terms of the split force policing and how that relates to the community policing alternatives and so on, I think is a worthwhile conversation for us all to understand. So I just mentioned that, and maybe ask Commissioner Decker to suggest with Commissioner Briggs whether we could achieve that at some point in the near future. Couple questions also about the COVID numbers. The question there relative to both testing and the hospitalization, or excuse me, the testing and vaccination levels. I'm wondering, are those, you may have addressed this in an earlier meeting, but are these self-reported kind of numbers? So, in some businesses, people are self-reporting whether they're vaccinated or not, but they're not, required to say one way or the other. So wondering how that is working here. And then also, like with the 52 officers who tested positive, are they under a requirement to test under any given conditions, or are these officers who had symptoms and then ended up testing, such that in both cases there may be larger number of officers who would test positive if they were testing, so you get what I'm saying. But how much of it is self-reported? How much of it really you're mandating or tracking in order to stay on top of the picture?
So we currently are testing weekly in our academy for our recruits and the work site there. And I'm happy to report that nearly all of the recent academy recruits have been vaccinated upon entry. But it is still a voluntary vaccination process. I look forward to the city formulating it as a requirement or a requirement of ongoing testing. But currently the process of testing outside of the academy is the officer or the employee simply goes on either their own time or with the department resources to get tested. The vast majority of them are symptomatic. There are some that are monitoring themselves because of recent exposures with a workmate or partner, and then they'll test for the presence of COVID as an awareness for themselves. The vaccination rates are self-reported. We have reported that 51% of the department has received at least one dose, and 44.5% have received both doses. Those are officers that have either participated in the department's vaccination program that was supported by the city fire department, or have stepped forward and said, here's my vaccination card. I believe that once the city, again, formulates its vaccination requirements, that those numbers will likely increase, as some that have been vaccinated have perhaps not stepped forward, even though we're encouraging them to. It's a voluntary basis at this point. At some point, I see that as a requirement, or the individual will be assumed to be not vaccinated and will be required to participate in a test in order to be at work.
I appreciate that, but it sounds like on both fronts, both with regard to testing and vaccination rates, and what I'm hearing, I don't understand to be an outlier situation from where some employers are and where even the country is. I'm pointing out that at the end of the day, we really don't know what the numbers really are. I mean, that's my impression, that we have some sense of it, but because I'm just thinking, there could potentially be officers who are asymptomatic and therefore choose not to test, but may have some infection, right? Or they wouldn't know, or they may have been infected and they didn't test until 15 days later. So maybe they've got antibodies, but they don't have current infection. So I'm just pointing out that this is kind of a snapshot. It's an indication, but it's not, we're not really in a position to really know.
The underreporting of COVID has been widely reported as a phenomenon that's occurring, not just here in LAPD. I fully agree with you. I think that we have individuals that were likely either active with a COVID infection or previously that was not known to us. We've seen that with people who are giving blood, and they come back with antibodies that the Red Cross will advise them that they had, and they previously were not aware that they had suffered from COVID. So COVID numbers, not just in LAPD and in the county, but across this country and the world, are believed to be significantly underreported because of testing and because of the asymptomatic nature of some infections and so forth. So this is at merely a scale of magnitude as we learn what we can learn.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. Chief, a few follow-ups on some of those items. With respect to the sworn personnel numbers, which are, you reported at 9410 as of today. Since cadets or recruits just started in the academy recently, and it'll take 6 months for them to come out and join the force and be out in patrol, do you have a projection as to how low that number 9410 could go before we start replenishing those numbers on the streets? And you're on mute, sir.
So the 9410 as of July 31st included the July 5th class. We add the recruits that are in the academy for their 6-month engagement in the total number. Another class started in early August, and so in another either next week or the week after, once they are showed on payroll, will include those additional 60 personnel. That's the challenge here, is that we're at 9410 with only 56 or 57 of them as recruits. When we go back to 2006, there were 250 recruits in the academy. So our true field force is going to continue to attrit over the next 5 months before that first academy class comes into the field. So our true number of fieldable workforce will likely reduce an additional 250 personnel because of attrition through retirements. It is one of our matters that we've identified, I think it was last week or week before, that internally we're encouraging, we recognize that our employees, we're experiencing a higher rate of attrition than we have in previous years. And this was a question by Commissioner Clancy and others about the underlying reason why. And it is, we believe, an emotional aspect of their wellness and believing that some of the challenges before them, they're opting to either go to a different profession or leave the region and to enter in law enforcement in a different region. To that end, we are working internally with our command officers and with our training officers and so forth to encourage people to stay the course. We recognize that this weekend was a very tough weekend in American law enforcement. We lost a 29-year-old Chicago cop 2 months back, just on 2 months of maternities, and was brutally shot and killed. Our partners in critical condition. We had a La Habra officer here in our own region that was shot and is in critical condition with gun violence. So there, in the backdrop of that, I saw some people who are critical of law enforcement that seemingly amplified their criticism of what comes with the job and minimize the risks that these officers are taking. And that is heartbreaking to officers and their families, and it wears on them. And some have said with that, it's time to leave. Our internal message is to encourage them that what we see every day and what we saw last Tuesday night and National Night Out is that this is a profession that's supported. Their work matters. They count, and not to get embroiled in this negative, cynical world. Policing is on a reform path. Be proud of what you do and recognize we've got farther to go, but that does not minimize the value you have and the appreciation that we have for your service and your dedication. Those are conversations we're having with young and old as a means of supporting them in their heart and their family. This last week's been a tough week with people who have come to work to do this job, and yet now they're finding themselves hospitalized, find themselves facing uncertainty of whether they'll survive this pandemic. And yet other officers and their family members are still coming to work with that potential exposure. So this is a tumultuous time, but I believe that that it's critical that we identify these issues and that we work forward, encouraging them, ensuring they have the tools, the emotional support, and that includes that of the public, while at the same time being committed to ensuring that this department represents 21st century policing at its finest. And when we fail, we fall short of that we address it, and we stay committed on a path of progress of building trust in each of our communities.
Thank you, Chief. Retention is certainly an issue. As we heard, we saw the numbers, and you're giving better context to just numbers in your presentation. So thank you for that. Retention's one side and recruitment's the other, and I assume many of those issues are impacting the recruitment. Last we had a recruitment update. It appeared that there was, at least at that time, a robust list of potential candidates. I know you're paying close attention to the recruitment as well. Are you seeing any of those numbers going down? Because the objective for this year is quite significant in
Yes.
terms of hiring. So have you seen yet any issue with the potential recruitment of candidates to fill all these positions that are available?
Yes. So I met yesterday with Captain McCraney and Commander Vic Davalos, and to talk about our recruitment efforts, particularly our diversity for African Americans, Asian Pacific Islander, and women as recruits and as qualified candidates to join this department. I'm happy to report that that they have a marketing plan, an outreach and engagement that has already begun to target those groups to bring them, to interest them into, I think, a tremendous profession, and one that offers opportunities. Despite the criticism, there is still much to be proud of in this profession, and we need that next generation to come from the communities around here, around Los Angeles, that are reflective of Los Angeles and its makeup. So, but I will say, having said that, two challenges. One, personnel department has sustained significant losses of personnel through the same city fiscal crisis, and is working now to employ additional analysts to do needed background investigations to deal with the recruit inflows that we need. Secondly, we are seeing challenge because of our inability to go outreach engagements, such as like universities and colleges, that this is much a virtual world of our recruitment. And we are seeing some challenges on our diversity. On the number of applicants, we look at the proportionality of the total number of applicants. How many of them are women? How many of them are the groups that we particularly want to broaden and deepen our representation? And we're identifying and focusing our recruitment and development efforts within those pools, because it's critical that we not lose them. Every applicant, however, will have an opportunity. Every individual in this who wants to be a police officer is going to be given a fair shake, a level ground to come in and become a member of this proud organization if they're qualified. That is a substantial task, but my commitment and our commitment is that we're, as an equal opportunity employer, we're going to hire every qualified person. Having said that, though, we are designing our marketing, outreach, and mentorship on those that we want to see deeper levels of diversity, so that we can ensure that we are striving and doing everything possible to meet the goals, which is to have, as you know, to have half of our academy classes made up of women, 20% of our academy classes with African Americans, and 10% of Asian Pacific Islanders. Those just don't happen automatically. But I worry, because our ambition is to hire more than 700 recruits, is that the pool of those candidates is not deep enough to sustain those proportions. However, if we have pools of qualified applicants, regardless of whether they meet those diversity ambitions or not, it is our desire to hire them, because of the critical need that we have police officers working and staffing our positions throughout this organization.
Thank you, Chief. A final question, just a brief one on the COVID numbers. And the City Council is taking action along with the mayor on that. Just a quick question. All of those rules that are being implemented will apply equally to the LAPD, correct?
Oh, yes. This is it's one city on this. I'm proud of the mayor and the elected officials. They've not tried to take one channel or another. This is all city employees, and I think that's the appropriate approach of public service.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Other questions, commissioners? Anything further? Seeing none, we'll move then to public comment. Thank you. Madam Secretary, please open up the queue and call the first person in queue.
Okay, our first speaker is Betty Lay, followed by Gina Viola.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, what items would you like to speak on?
I'd like to speak on agenda items 3A, 3B, 4B, Chief's report, and public comment, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay, first off, as I always start, I support Chief Moore. I support all of LAPD. We need to refund them, not defund them. Please, that is very important. Also, I support agenda items 3A. I support agenda item 3B, and I support agenda item 4B. I'd also like to congratulate this month's or this week's CPAB presentation. I hope they do a good job. I'm sure they will. Also, public comment. I'm sorry that Commissioner Briggs isn't with us today, because I wanted to let him know that at our national night out, we not only had a LAPD recruitment table, and regarding COVID, we also had a COVID testing and vaccination table. It was very important to support not only LA County, but LAPD and everybody that was involved with National Night Out if they volunteered, they all had their masks, they all had extra gloves, we had extra antibacterial spray. So we followed the LA County Health Department guidelines on that. We were very pleased with the outcome. And all I can say is I'm hoping that at some point Commissioner Briggs will be able to join one of our Zoom meetings so we can let him know how much we're supporting his efforts to increase LAPD as well. I thank you so much for the time to speak. Everybody stay safe and healthy. I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Gina Viola, followed by Matheus Cadane.
Everything.
Okay,
Good
3
morning,
minutes.
Chief. First of all, I want to talk about the question that regarding the Bonner asked the question that how many officers we actually need in order to protect the city. Well, not really about how much the city can afford, how much the budget, how much the city council, how important the politically correct movement, but it's actually how many officers can fight the shooting violence, can fight the rape, the robbery, all sort of crime in the city. So that's the number we should be asking for. And then that is a good question.
Madam Secretary, I've interrupted this. The speaker is using someone else's name. Now, people don't have to put their own name in, but they certainly shouldn't be putting the name of a regular attendee representing them to be someone who is a regular advocate. If this speaker wishes to speak.
Yes, just continue to fuck yourself. Yes, continue to fuck yourself.
Okay, next speaker, please.
Yes, just go continue to fuck yourself.
Okay, next speaker, please. Thank you. Matheus Cadane, I believe you had next in queue, Madam Secretary.
Hi, wow, that was awful. Hello?
What items did you like to speak on?
All of them, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay, yeah. I guess first up on the chief's report, Chief Moore, please stop pathetically pushing training and CSP as viable means of quelling your police force's bloodlust. They've never worked. They haven't worked. It's disgusting that you keep pushing it. And Commissioner Bonner, that was a great question about COVID and what an absolute shit show the LAPD is in handling this pandemic. Your officers aren't required to get tested regularly. They don't have to prove that they're vaccinated, and they're never wearing masks. And this pandemic's getting worse in LA, and I would assume they're a driving force in that. It's unsettling to see the lack of urgency when this is discussed. Like there seems to be a casual tone saying, "Oh, we don't really know what the numbers are." Yeah, this is actually killing people. So maybe if we can press that a little bit further. And Briggs, I do want to say that this is an outlier. Most employers in LA at least mandate that their employees are regularly tested and have to prove that they're vaccinated if they claim to be vaccinated. And then regarding your other comment, Chief Moore, let me be clear. Policing is not a noble profession. It's a disgusting profession. It's a profession descended from slave catching, and it serves to uphold white supremacy. However, Chief Moore, the lack of visible grief for the deaths of the police officers you mentioned, it isn't a manifestation of the apathy of a cruel and cynical world. If anything, it's a reflection of the apathy shown by the LAPD toward the death of Angelenos. Grieving for these officers while not acknowledging the deaths of Black and Brown Angelenos, like the two elderly community members who died as a result of the June 30th bombing that you just didn't bring up at all, implies that their deaths aren't as significant as that of your officers or of any officers. Luckily, we're here to remind you that Black Lives Matter, and we affirm that fact. I also want to speak on the brutality shown toward NBA player Jackson Hayes. I should say 21-year-old Jackson Hayes, you know, a young man. You know, it's not surprising at all. Those officers were wearing body cams, but that's not the footage we saw. That's not the footage that showed that Jackson Hayes was brutalized. It was his friend who was there recording that video. And I want to point out that it's super gross that the LAPPL came out and said that the NBA needs to punish Jackson Hayes for using a racial slur. And while racism is definitely their purview, it's something they excel at. It is just beyond hypocritical for them to, go after him for that. And I do want to point out that those officers did tase Jackson Hayes in the chest, which Axon, says officers shouldn't do because it could be lethal. Anyway, this commission's a sham. I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Adam, followed by Zach Sherwin.
Hello.
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
Hey, Becky. Let me see. I want to speak on all of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Great, thanks. It's painful to listen to and see the evidence of LAPD officers not caring or not believing in the pandemic. And it's kind of painful to watch Bonner, who thankfully is at least asking questions about it, but like having to kid glove you, Chief Moore. I don't know what oversight is happening right now with regard to this. I know that like a month ago or something, Soboroff was talking about giving out prizes for people that get vaccinated. Like, really? Sorry, my son was crying, but he's all better now. All right, I'm going to move on to number 3B. Also, Mr. T-Fank, fresh cut for the summer. Gotta love it. So you all are going to approve these consent agenda items, which notably are back to being consent agenda items. There's a bunch of donations here. And I'm wondering if you all have looked at them. Like Los Angeles Police Revolver and Athletic Club, like granted they're only donating $500, but isn't this the same Los Angeles Police Revolver and Athletic Club whose employees were helping traffic illegal stolen guns with the help of the commander of the West LA Bureau, Jonathan Tom. Is it really good to be accepting donations while there's supposedly a investigation into these stolen guns? Though I don't think that there actually is. Do you know who LA Police Gear is? Is it run by officers, former officers, maybe one of them who shot and killed Leroy Barnes Jr. as part of the Pasadena Police Department in 2009? I don't know if it's the same guy, but do you? I feel bad for Joey. Anyway, yeah, I just hope you all quit your job soon. Have a good day.
Okay, next speaker, please.
Okay, next speaker is Zach Sherwin, followed by caller ending 2992.
Good morning. I'd like to speak on all items and also to say, Madam Secretary, that you're complicit in all these remarks.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Chief Moore must have the strongest ankles in law enforcement, because every single week we listen to him tiptoe around all the elephants in this room. Why isn't this man giving a weekly update on the fireworks explosion in South LA? Commissioners, why aren't you asking for it? Why doesn't Moore speak to the major events of the week that the community might be interested in hearing a response to? For instance, the fact that the cop who murdered Kenneth French is now being prosecuted by the Attorney General. That's new this week. You ruled that shooting out of policy. Why don't you mention it, commissioners? You'd think some of these issues might come up somehow, sometime. Instead, Bonner asks a few questions and the rest of you either sit there silently and let it sail by, or maybe you lob a couple softballs at him. Oversight, the citizen's voice in police affairs, civilians who donate their time to the city while maintaining their professional careers. There's an article in the LA Times today about the continuing disruption to the lives of people affected by the explosion in South LA, ultimately due to Moore not double checking the math. That was in late June, and some of these people still don't live in their homes, but Chief Moore has meaningfully responded by saying that he's going to post an officer on the corner 24/7. Why isn't the police department coming out of its pocket to make these family whole like 5 weeks ago? Meanwhile, in item 3B, as a previous caller mentioned, I hope I don't get cut off for acknowledging that, you're going to approve $10,000 for Joey the horse. What would $10,000 do for those families in South LA? This policy of making people comment at the beginning of the meeting and for only 5 minutes, we're not going to let it drop. It is literally 1984 style Orwellian doublespeak for you to say that you are the citizen's voice, and then to have been taking this action for a year and a half that could not more literally have the result of suppressing the citizen's voice. It is a cartoonishly heightened example of the daylight between what this board is supposed to be doing and what you purport to do and what you actually do. What are you doing? Why does it work like this, that we can't comment after we hear each item and that it's only 45 minutes and it has to happen at the beginning? You used to put it before the chief's report and then everybody freaked out, and so you moved it after that. People are no less freaked out by the fact that it's as limited as it is. So listen to what people are clamoring for and respond to it. There's no good reason for it that you can articulate, except that Moore didn't like getting his ass handed to him and being told to choke on some random guy's cock on June 2nd of last year. I want to acknowledge that a previous caller used the name.
Let's move on to the next speaker, please. Thank you.
Okay. The next speaker is caller ending 2992, followed by Jason R.
Hi, good morning. All items, please. And
Okay.
general comment.
3 minutes.
Okay. I'm hearing a lot about being a part of the change with respect to LAPD recruitment. What change? That suggests that LAPD officers are part of the problem and need to change, and they aren't. The department demographics should represent that of the community as it currently does, but the recruitment social media accounts appear to now only show recruitment photos meant to encourage Black Angelenos to apply. I'm all for diversity, especially the advancement of women, but Join LAPD is leaving out white, Asian, and Latino male and females. Its social media is almost discouraging white females and males to apply. Training is always great, but the big problem isn't LAPD or the officers. The problem are the gangbangers and the groups and politicians who make excuses for them and martyr them. If anyone's wondering why applications may be down, it's not hard to figure out why. Who would want to work for a department that is constantly accused of being racist killers? This police commission allows the groups who make those disgusting and false accusations to come on here and speak for unlimited amounts of time, like the Daniel Hernandez family and others. If everyone cares about rising violent crime, then you'll stop giving time, attention, and respect to those groups. As for COVID vaccinations, I'm vaccinated, and most people that I know are. There's no excuse to not be vaccinated in LA County if one wants. Everyone has access in all areas and across demographics. That being said, if those don't want to receive the vaccination, then they shouldn't be made to. If they contract COVID and die, then it's 100% on them. If they're overweight and unhealthy or have underlying health conditions and they choose not to vaccinate, then so be it. As for the callers, LAPD officers not wearing masks aren't killing anyone. Get vaccinated yourself and you should have nothing to worry about. I'm very disturbed. I was very disturbed last week at the personal attacks made on Commissioner Briggs. Callers were allowed to make disgusting racist comments towards him and totally hit below the belt. Thank you, Lou, for stepping in. Briggs is either completely controlled or perhaps stunned. Eileen, I urge you to do something about this. It's one thing to accuse a commissioner of being corrupt, unfair, crooked, etc., but another to make racist slurs and personal attacks on their family and children. You guys need to do something about this as a board. NBA players shouldn't get a free pass because he's black or an NBA star. The NBA shouldn't only punish him for attacking a police officer, but the DA or city attorney should as well. LAPD can receive whatever donations they want. It's legal and there's nothing unethical about it. People should have the right to do whatever the hell they want with their own money, and it's none of anyone else's business. None of the callers seem to have a problem with BLM receiving donations and using them to buy fancy houses by the beach, yet they have a problem with LAPD receiving community donations to buy equipment. I support Chief Moore. He has a very difficult job. I support LAPD, all the officers, and yield my time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Jason R., followed by caller ending 1108.
Hello.
Hi, what items did you like to speak on?
All of them.
3 minutes.
Musty Mike, you've been very active on Twitter as of late. Let's dive deeper into those tweets. Chief Moore retweeted a link to a GoFundMe for an Eagle Scout whose Eagle project is to rehab the LAPD Police Academy Chapel. To begin with, you shared that GoFundMe, but you didn't donate any money. As a millionaire, what gives? Chief, for the record, would you like to comment on why you haven't shared the GoFundMes of the victims of the intentional bombing by your department at 27th and San Pedro? Another question for you, Chief. How much has your department and your officers raised to support this community over the last 41 days? No amount of propaganda is going to save you, Chief Moore. You spoke about being at the Dream Center giving out backpacks. I'm wondering, did you save some of those backpacks for the kids who can't sleep as a result of your department's bombing of their neighborhood on June 30th? I've been seeing a lot of the hashtag path forward being used as of late. For the record, Stacey Spell is robbing the city of at least $180,000 a year to come up with hashtags like path forward. I've seen Chief Moore use it, but he's been using it wrong. The path forward is one without you and this department. And your tweet should go something like this: Fire Chief Moore, sign the petition at tinyurl/fire LAPD Chief Moore. Hashtag path forward, hashtag defund the police. Oh, the night out event. I truly apologize that we didn't run into each other. I looked for you, but for whatever reason, you didn't want to let the public know which one you'd be at. Don't worry, we'll cross paths soon and those ankles won't stand a chance. And then lastly, I see this Bible quote you tweeted out and one that is thrown around by white supremacists very much like yourself. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Funny that you quote a black man in Jesus, given how your department treats black men. Need I remind everyone on this commission that LAPD officers in South Central were found to have illegally and unjustly entered the names of black residents into gang databases. We know that his department beefs up crime stats because they've made it illegal to be black in public. We know your department has murdered Charlie Africa, Albert Ramon Dorsey, Ezell Ford, and the list goes on and on. So think twice before you quote the Bible more. Also, I know you can't do math, but it appears you can't read either. You do realize, Mobster Mike, that Jesus himself was the victim of brutality by police of that time. Here's a more appropriate verse for your profession, Moore. But you have eyes and heart only for dishonest gain, for shedding innocent blood, and for practicing oppression and violence. Jeremiah chapter 22, verse 17, just in case you want to go back to it. And also, God is not on your side, he's on ours. The Lord works righteousness and justice for all who are oppressed. Psalm 103:6. In that bullshit report of More Lies, you spoke about how LAPD officers worry about surviving this pandemic and potential exposure to COVID. So if that's the case, why don't you discipline your officers who fail to wear masks? We see videos daily from Film the Police LA on Twitter of your officers not wearing masks. Where's the report on how many of them have been disciplined and how many complaints have you received since the beginning of the pandemic? Chief Moore must go. Chief Moore will go. Fuck you, Chief Moore. Fire Chief Moore and free Joey.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending 1108, followed by Q Jean-Marie.
Yeah, hi, it's Daniel Gus, all items and general public comment, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Great. Just a reminder that if a Twitter account that is an official account of the chief, or if the uniform is being shown on the Twitter account and you're tweeting Bible quotes, that is a government endorsement of a religious perspective, and you will get sued on First Amendment, either by me or somebody else. So I would strongly recommend deleting that and making sure nobody sends an official religious message on behalf of this government agency. That's a simple separation in church and state issue. Nobody wants to support the agency more than I do. I support the men and women on the front lines. I don't support the agency because time and again, it has shown me that despite its claims about treating people evenly or fairly or honestly or transparently, it doesn't. And if the LAPD can abuse someone like me who has all of the good blessings, keyword there, pun intended, of a relatively peaceful suburban life in LA, then I know that it gets much worse for people of color and people on the downside of circumstances across LA. So, sued you guys and beat you a year and a half ago. Suing the city 2 weeks ago, and I beat you. I'm suing you again in 2 weeks, and you guys can't stop hurting your own case. 14 days before the trial, the LAPD says, oh, your public records request that you need for the trial, we need another 14 days. So now I'm going to take that letter, show it to the judge and say, Your Honor, they waited until 14 days before the case, before the trial to say, oh, we need another 14 days. Also, Your Honor, the LAPD says special circumstances require this 14-day delay, but you have to say what the 14-day and the circumstances are. You can't just say special circumstances, we get another 14 days. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to show the judge every other time you did this. Special circumstances, special circumstances. Tell us, Chief Moore, what is the special circumstance the LAP needs another 2 weeks for a one-page email? It's going to cause you guys to lose the case. Why don't you just, guys, play things straight? Provide public documents, stop protecting the politicians, stop shooting yourself in the foot, because a little small claims case shouldn't matter much to you guys, but your credibility is going to be hurt even further when I beat you again, when you're going to have to send me another check. I'm going to post it online, and your credibility erodes for absolutely no reason. Treat people fairly, treat people honestly. I support the men and women of the LAPD. I don't support the agency because time and again, you prove not worthy of the public trust. I like you personally. I do not.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Q Jean-Marie, followed by TK.
Good morning. I would like to speak to all of the items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
I said I wouldn't call back this commission because obviously I think it's very toxic. And people come on here and say stuff about Black folks without doing their homework. So I want to actually communicate a picture of a pattern of disregard, right? We know that in 1965, there was the Watts Uprising because of police brutality. In 67, LBJ's Kerner Commission, all of these commissions, by the way, the McCone Commission, all of them recommended training. And here we are in 2021, I'm hearing about training. We talk about the law enforcement and people leaving the force. One of the reasons I believe is 1 John 3:18, dear children, let us not love in words or speech, but with actions and truth. And the actions of the LAPD does not match the rhetoric. There's a mentality in law enforcement. This is why there was a nationwide uprising. And what did law enforcement do? When we declared that Black Lives Matter after the brutal murder of a Black person, they responded, Blue Lives Matter. Black and brown folks have never experienced the empathy of law enforcement. The disregard for the George Floyd Valentine incident, let's just move on, is what it seems like. No one was held accountable. Another example of this pattern of disregard by the LAPD is how quiet we are about the officers that were involved in the January 6th insurrection. Another example of disregard for Black and brown communities is the detonation of explosives in communities. And now we know that 2 family community members have passed away. And the whole dancing around the issue and not addressing the issue. You can't expect these communities to care and love you and want to be part of you. I keep hearing about the need to hire more officers, but we've had a housing issue in our community in Los Angeles forever. That is the most pressing issue. In the crime report, the chief mentioned homelessness being one of the problems. If folks had homes, real affordable, humane, dignified, and affordable housing, they wouldn't need LAPD in their lives. And as it relates to guns, the chief mentioned targeted individuals who are in possession of guns. This is frustrating when we know that America worshiped guns and gun sales skyrocketed just in January alone by white supremacy. We know that guns are the tool of white supremacy. So if we're going to deal with gun violence, we need to deal with white supremacy, or we're not going to deal with gun violence. I yield my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have TK followed by caller ending 4952.
Hello,
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
all of them, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
First off, I want to honor that we're on indigenous stolen land. This is Tungva, Quiche, Tataviam, Hachiman, and Chumash land. I want to honor our folks, our loved ones that have been killed by law enforcement. There's over 640 over the past 7 years that have been killed by LAPD and LA Sheriff's Department with zero accountability. Even the ones such as Grishario Mack that were found out of policy, no one has been held accountable for the deaths of our loved ones. And this is unacceptable. We go on week after week, month after month, year after year with this charade here of a police commission. Y'all rubber stamp the violence of your own officers. And you talk about recruiting and reform. There is no reforming this evil. Y'all descended from slave catching. How can we reform this evil? You want to recruit more folks? Your numbers are dropping substantially. And I wonder why, because you don't know how to handle the pandemic, first of all. 2,000 of your officers, was that correct, that caught COVID? An officer died last week. I'm sorry, I forgot her name. And y'all continue to wear no masks out there with no regard for the public. Y'all continue to kill and abuse our loved ones in the Black and brown communities and allow your pro-blue and racist individuals to call in and be out of your own policy of your standards of the public comment. Who was the gentleman that called in and used one of our comrades' names? How did that even occur? Right? He used a name of one of our people and y'all just blew past it like it was nothing. And the bombing in South LA. Why has there been no compensation, real compensation for these folks, and no regard for the 2 lives that were lost from the negligence of this department? How do you take 14 pounds or whatever, 42 pounds and misconstrue that to a lesser amount? Y'all detonated a bomb in a residential neighborhood, and you know damn well that would not happen in Beverly Hills. Where's the regard for life in Black and brown neighborhoods? Black Lives Matter, defund the police, fund our communities, right? and fire Chief Moore. This whole department needs to be dismantled.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending 4952, followed by Ricky.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
I'm going to speak on all of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to start by commenting on last week's report from LAPD about the March raid on Echo Park. And specifically, I wanted to talk about body cameras. And as I do that, I'm going to take us back to 2015, which is when the Stop LAPD Fine Coalition published a report called Body-Worn Cameras and Empty Reform to Expand the Surveillance State. And this is a report that still holds up today. And the report was in response to how nationwide at that time, as police continue to murder Black and brown folks, a disproportionate number of whom were disabled or unhoused, body-worn cameras at that time on every officer was something that was being pushed as a solution to that violence. And it was being framed or portrayed as something that would objectively be able to capture a situation. It was being pushed that way. And it was even pitched here in LA by Sober Off specifically as something that would potentially magically change the behavior of cops as they were being filmed in a way that would reduce violence. That was how it was pitched to the community, and that's how it kind of slid in. But what a number of folks already knew, and as was described in that report, that 2015 report from the coalition, was that body-worn video would not decrease police violence, and it would not result in a form of justice for community, and it would in fact be used as a tool of the state to gather evidence to be used against community. It would be used to protect cops, to protect the state. And I bring that up today because this was never more clear than listening to that report last week of who body-worn video is here for. And we have to remember this as we hear these recommendations from LAPD that they need more, even more technology, even more filming, even more cameras. And in that report, what we heard was that for all of the body-worn videos that were in the park that night, on those nights, LAPD has no accurate accounting or assessment of how their, what they call less lethal weapons were used against community members. They have no reporting of that, no accurate assessment of police use of force. Rather, they're saying that now they need more videographers, more cameras, more resources. They're saying it's just too hard to review all of that body-worn video. And what this really tells us is it tells us about LAPD's process, and it's also very informative as we think back to the recent investigations into Metro cops, how cops are falsifying information and how that was revealed, exposed by a community member as usual. In case, lest any of us be holding out any hope that when LAPD does investigations, they are actually reviewing exhaustively the body-worn video. We know that they are not, because as they tell us themselves, it is simply too time consuming. So what this brings us back to is this is yet more evidence, yet more confirmation of how body-worn video and other so-called reforms are simply being used by police to protect and defend their own. And that comes at the cost of the city, that comes at the cost of the residents of LA, who this year alone are paying over $12 million for body-worn video on cops that ultimately will be used against community members. Defund the police, fuck the police, abolish the police. That's my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Ricky, followed by Paula Miner.
Hi, yes, all available items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yes, this is Richie Serjanko from the People City Council. Just first want to say solidarity to all the folks that have lost family members to senseless LAPD violence. And that includes the continuance of LAPD officers not wearing masks in Los Angeles. Chief Moore gets on here and does this whole spiel about, they're taking COVID seriously. We see pictures and videos every day of officers not wearing masks. LAPD has thousands and thousands of people that have caught COVID. It's because they don't wear masks and only 50% are vaccinated. LAPD is a public health crisis in itself. It's really a joke, Chief Moore, that you consider yourself a serious individual. If you were working in any other, department in the world, other than the one that pays you $500,000 a year, Musty Mike, he would have lost your job. This is an absolute abject failure of leadership, and that falls on you, Chief Moore. 10 deaths from LAPD officers from COVID. Those are on your blood is on your hands, Chief Moore. The 2 people that died from the bombing in South Central, that blood is on your hands, Chief Moore. You've shot 2 people yourself. You've killed 1 person. You're a murderer. We know this is how you run your department. You are a violent, brutal force, and this is what you like to see. And you saw another example of it with Jackson Hayes. And it was funny that LAPD came out with this statement beforehand, and then we saw the video that Jackson Hayes' friends took. And they captured that you brutalized this player, and then the audacity of the LAPPL to say that NBA should do something to Jackson Hayes. It's you guys are just a joke. LAPD is a joke. LAPD was directed not to tase people in the chest since 2009 and not to use neck restraint since 2020. And that's what we saw in the video with Jackson Hayes. Reform can't fix this. You guys don't follow what you're fucking supposed to be reformed to. You came from slave catchers. This system cannot be reformed. As long as LAPD exists, they will continue to brutalize, harass, terrorize Black and brown Angelenos. Chief Moore must go. Calling in solidarity with Black Lives Matter LA. Chief Moore, you're a fucking joke, bro. Don't think yourself as serious. You are the biggest clown in Los Angeles. We all make fun of you, dude.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Paula Miner, followed by Kim. Paula Miner, you're on.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
Yes. This is Paula Miner from Black Lives LA. LAPD says crime is going up and up, but the LAPD budget continues to go up. LAPD does not prevent crime. LAPD does not reduce the crime. And even by their own reporting, LAPD does not significantly solve crimes, especially in Black, brown, and poor neighborhoods. So what does LAPD do? They harm the people of LA. They shoot them with rubber bullets. They fail at crowd control. They brutalize journalists, and they regularly kill citizens and then blame the killings on the victim. This commission, you sit here week after week and you hear LAPD report and explain their failures, their harms. You sit there and you hear them present reports. You hear them present evaluations by outside groups of their failure. They said, we failed in the George Floyd protests of 2020, but it was the protesters' fault. They said, we failed at the We Spa, but it was the protesters and the journalists' fault. They said, we failed in Echo Park, but it was the park rangers' fault. They said, we failed when we detonated explosives in the residential neighborhood of 27th and San Pedro, but that wasn't our fault. We don't follow our own procedures and training, he said. We failed to give officers clear direction and orders. Why do they fail? They truly lack leadership. If any leader, executive, CEO, whatever, in any company, corporation, etc., failed to lead like Chief Moore, they would have been gone, been fired. The city continues to receive more and more lawsuits, more and more costs of public dollars for the failures coming from Chief Moore's leadership. You commissioners sit there and say, okay, do better next time. Now, in addition to the many questionable officer-involved fatal shootings, you now have 2 people whose deaths are a result of the 4th of July publicity stunt conducted by LAPD by detonating a bomb in a residential neighborhood. And Chief Moore says, although the victim's roof fell in on him and the other victim was on oxygen and had to move abruptly, it was their fault because they had pre-existing conditions. How outrageous. Chief Moore must go. Please, this has got to stop. I yield my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Kim, followed by caller ending 0887.
And that will be our last speaker today, 0887.
Okay.
This is Kim. Can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
All of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
I'm going to echo what Paula Miner said. I am appalled that we didn't even get to hear about the bombing today, about the individuals that have been harmed. I am appalled that there's been no update on the reparations that need to be made to them. I am appalled that they have not been made whole. I am appalled that we haven't discussed the money that needs to be paid to them up front, not as a reimbursement after they've already paid. They don't have money to pay for that. You all need to make sure these people are made whole. And I have yet to hear that they have been made whole. Just like Paula Miner was saying, there's no responsibility taken. And when you talk about officers involved shooting, oh, there was a fatal incident. No, the police killed this person. I'm tired of hearing officer involved shooting. Someone was either shot and injured or they were killed by the police. And there's no responsibility taken for that. Because even in that incident, those incidents, you blame the victim. The victim was doing that and the victim was doing this, and the person was doing this. No. If you take out your gun and you shoot someone and you don't allow them their day in court, or maybe you shouldn't have even shot them at all because they weren't even involved in a crime, whatever the reason is, they are supposed to go to court, and the police are not judge and jury. The solution to someone committing a crime or someone who's unarmed and has done nothing is not public execution. It's not. But that seems to be okay around here because every time this happens, there's no accountability, none. And I'm getting tired of every time he comes on here, he's like, well, this wasn't our fault and that wasn't our fault. And we'll, police officer involved shooting. No, the police killed this person, and it's happened way too many times. In fact, more than any other county in the country. And we are the most murderous, not we, because I'm not a part of it. You guys are the most murderous police force in the nation. And that is disgusting. And you should be held accountable for that. And it does not mean more police. It does not mean we need more people in the streets. It means that we need resources for our communities, jobs, healthcare. All of those things prevent crime, not more police showing up to kill our people. That's what prevents crime. It's been proven over and over and over again. So take the money away from the police and give it to the communities so that we can prevent crime. That's what does it. And I'm getting tired of hearing these excuses. This police chief needs to go. He has not done his job. He is exacerbating every situation. He needs to be fired immediately.
Okay, and our final speaker, caller ending 0887.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
Yes. I'd like to speak on public comment. My name is James. I called before, and I have a neighbor that's threatened me, and I'm having problems with Foothill Division handling the situation and getting in contact with community policing. I like to say we support the police. We're in the San Fernando Valley. We like our police. I called the other day because this person who threatened me was blocking my driveway, wouldn't allow people to come in or go out. And I called the police. It took 4 hours for them to respond. And I just, like to resolve this issue. We have a lot of problems with thuggery going on, and we need the police. These people are not going to police themselves. They're just going to continue to create chaos and just damage our communities. And we need to handle that. We need to take care of that situation. So we support the police, we support the chief, and we understand he's under a lot of pressure and he's had a lot of problems. And we just need to support him and be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. Madam Secretary, if you could get the Office of the Chief of Police, the phone number of that individual who indicated there was a threat by a neighbor of some sort, just so that there can be some follow-up. I would appreciate that. And Mr. Teefank, I neglected earlier just to mention to you to please work with the executive committee in following up on Commissioner Bonner's request for a report back so that item can be agendized. Thank you very much. We'll move on the agenda. The next item is item 3, the consent items. Does any member of the commission wish to hold any of those items? Otherwise, I'll call them all for a vote. Items 3A and 3B, sorry.
I did have a quick question about one of the donations. So I don't have my agenda up to see which number that is, but.
All right, very well. Let's separate them out and let me call up first then item 3A relative to the expense statement for the chief of police. The recommended board action is to approve the report. Is there a second on that item?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. It passes 4-0. Item 3B, which is the donation, Commissioner Bonner, I believe that you had a question on. And Madam Secretary, if I could ask you to bring up the department, or why don't you ask your question, Commissioner Bonner, and we can see who the right person is to answer it.
All right, thank you. Yeah, no, I'm just noting that the National Dispatchers Week was back in April. I saw there was a discussion of the donations having been accepted, I think provisionally or something to that effect. But I just wanted clarification on the time frame as to why it's coming to us at this point in time.
Of course. Chief, are you able to answer that, or should we call Captain Valenzuela up?
Captain Vargas, I believe.
Captain Vargas. Okay, I had the wrong name down. Captain Vargas, then.
This is for item A.
3B.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, discussion point A.
The donation, sir.
Yes, the first one, yes.
Madam Secretary, do you have that as to who's to be called up? There we go. Captain Vargas, just open your microphone and your camera, please.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize. I'm actually on vacation. And so I actually am not going to turn my camera on. I'm actually not in my uniform.
Very well. Did you hear the question?
Yes, I did, ma'am. So the request, due to COVID, we weren't sure if we were going to have National Dispatch Week.
Listen to this. I'm sorry. Just.
Chief, your microphone's open, please.
Yeah, due to COVID, we were debating whether to have National Dispatchers Week or not. So it was the last minute when we decided we would, just to honor our dispatchers because they do so much for the community and for the city, that we decided to have it. And that's when we put out for the request. So it was a last minute request we did. And it was, and that's the reason why it came out late, because of the fact that it was just a last minute event that we decided to plan when we saw a decrease in the COVID infections that we had within our command and throughout the city. So that's the reason why it's late, and I apologize for that.
Okay, I appreciate that. So the event was last minute, but also that's why it takes that amount of time once you've decided to do the event to process the donation and get it on our agenda.
That's correct, sir. Yeah, it was a last minute request to do it, and it was a last minute request for the donations, and then the process with the paperwork went through.
Got it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. Commissioner Kalanche, did you have a question or no? No. Okay. Any further questions from commissioners? Thank you.
Thank you.
In which case, then I'll call the item up and move it forward to approve the department's report and accept the donation. Is there a second? Second. It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 4-0. Commissioners, may I ask you, on the regular agenda, we do have a reward. Does anyone have a question on that, or can I call it up for a vote so that we can allow the commander to return to duties? Seeing no hands for questions, let's just take care of that vote. Item 4B is the department's report relative to the payment of a reward. I will move the matter forward to approve the report and transmit to the mayor and city council. Is there a second for that? Second. It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you very much. In which case, Madam Secretary, now let's call up the presentation and discussion by Southwest CPAB. And I believe that's Captain Espinoza and the captain's co-chair for Southwest. Captain, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to Southwest Division, to the commission meeting. We are very pleased to have you and your co-chair of CPAB present. We'll allow you, Captain, the honor of introducing your co-chair, but welcome, and we look forward to hearing from you, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, and fellow commissioners and Chief Moore. Definitely happy to be here. And I wanted to introduce my my CPAB co-chair, who should be on. Yes, there he is. I see him now. Mr. Johnny Rains, who's been a great partner and been part of CPAB here at Southwest for several years. I'm not going to take too much time myself because Johnny's going to give you an update on how the partnership between us and community has been working out here, especially in this age of reimagining. This is my, I think my third station that I've been a captain of, and here at Southwest, it is probably the most engaging community that I've been a part of. And I'm happy to report that obviously as an advisory board, they advise us of what their needs are, but they also hit the ground running and they put the work in themselves. And Johnny's going to talk a little bit about that work of our subcommittees and kind of the things that we've been doing with those subcommittees and some of the tangible results that the community has been able to advise us on, but not only advise us, but also put in a little bit of work to help us how we do our policing with the quality of life issues here. So Johnny, if you can, I'd like to take it away.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Glad to be here again. I've been here before, but it was quite a while ago when we used to actually be able to have meetings in person. So I'm glad that these are started again. And I guess my first thing I just want to say, a lot of the concerns and issues that people brought up, that's why there's a CPAB. That's why there are CPABs. That's where that energy and concerns should go. That's where things get changed. Having said that, go on. At Southwest, our CPAB mission is to serve as a resource and liaison to Southwest Division by providing community input regarding quality of life issues and law enforcement activities within the division, while empowering stakeholders to participate in the resolution of those concerns. In my view, the CPAB is not someplace where residents or stakeholders just come and drop off a problem, but community members have to be willing to be involved in the resolution of that situation or that concern as well. As Captain Espinoza said, my initiation into CPAB began when, he's actually a current candidate for governor in Michigan when Captain James Craig was at Southwest. And I've kind of been there ever since then in one capacity or another. We meet on the first Monday of every month, unless that Monday is a holiday, via Zoom. And I got to say that if there's anything positive that's come out of COVID, since we've been doing our meetings in a virtual fashion, we average between 50 and 90 folks at each meeting. So that has really boosted the level of involvement of citizens in our CPAB meetings. Based on input from the community, we decided to create 3 action committees. One dealing with homelessness issues, another fireworks, and another traffic. Those were the things that the community seemed to be most concerned about and really wanted to be involved in coming up with some ways to better handle those situations. Our homeless committee is led by a senior lead officer, Gabriel Roybal, and CPAB board member, Leslie Evans. And I believe a couple of the commissioners can remember we reported about this a few years ago when we had a really unique method of working with homeless situations where we actually used a very unique approach of bringing the services to where the people were rather than trying to get the people to go to where the services were. But with the pandemic and different situations, we haven't been able to do that. But we have come up with a committee And the focus of that committee is not to displace homeless individuals, but to assist in bringing the appropriate city and county resources to them, while maintaining a clean and safe environment for the remaining portion of the community. Committee currently has 6 members who meet on the 3rd Wednesday of each month. The committee collaborates with the council district, social workers, LASA, HOPICS, Bureau of Sanitation, and others. And we really have been able to see some positive impact in terms of getting people placed in homes, getting some of those encampments cleaned up, not cleaned out, but cleaned up. I say that because we don't clean out the people. We just try to, if folks are there because they need someplace to be, we want to try to make that area as clean as possible. And again, to bring them the services that they're looking for. We've had a lot of successes in the Murray Park Village, as well as in the Crenshaw Corridor. And the captain's going to mention some other areas where we've had success. But I think the main reason for the success is the collaboration between all those entities that I mentioned and the community. Again, really just bringing the services to where the people are, not telling people you need to go to this place to get that. Another of the committees, the action committees, is the fireworks committee. And we heard a lot about that this morning, but just some of the things that we've been able to do, and it's been an ongoing process. It's not just a 4th of July kind of thing, at least in Southwest Division, and I'm sure throughout the rest of the city. We have a fireworks problem. And the approach that we've taken there is to work directly through block clubs and homeowners associations, getting information out to the residents regarding, 1, fireworks are illegal in the city of Los Angeles, and communicating that information to people via flyers, via going to community and neighborhood and block club meetings, as I said, and getting the information to the youth who, and oftentimes don't understand that what they're asking mom and dad or uncle or aunt to get for them is in fact illegal. I think it's an information campaign that's going to resolve the issue. It's not just going to go away, but people need to understand, that there's safety involved. It's an illegal activity. We've gone door to door and put flyers on folks' doors. Community members have identified problem locations within their community. So a lot of energy and effort has been put into that through collaborations, again, with the fire department and the local council offices. And we've made an impact. It's still a problem, but we're working towards, minimizing that problem. And the 3rd committee is the traffic committee. It's led by Senior Lead Officer Paul Evlith and a rotating group of about 6 to 10 community members. And I think the key to that success of that committee has been, it's given us an opportunity to bring together several entities that need to talk to each other with regard to the community has concerns and complaints about, in particular, Crenshaw and cruising and car racing. Well, Crenshaw has, if you look at old photos in the city of Los Angeles, Crenshaw has been a location for cruising in your automobile just about ever since there's been a Crenshaw. That's part of our car culture in the city of Los Angeles. But what we've been able to accomplish with the committee is bring the committee and some representatives from the car clubs, representatives from other arms of law enforcement together and try to figure out ways that this, through compromise, everyone can have fun out of this. Cars do create a lot of noise. We've had some opportunities to work with the car clubs to get them to understand what the real concerns of the community are. It's not that there's this hatred or dislike of vehicles, but people don't want cars blocking their driveways. They don't want racing or going on their streets. And through collaborating with all of the folks involved, we've been able to experience some successes and eliminate some of the problems created by large gatherings of automobiles. I think that's the key, is bringing all the right people to a point where they're willing to discuss what the problem is. And we've gotten some business operators on the area of Crenshaw to get involved as well. But I think we're not there yet, but it's getting a lot better. And the idea of having a committee of citizens and being willing to meet with the folks that they believe are creating the problem has led us in the right direction toward resolving that. So all in all, I'd say those are our 3 action committees, and they all seem to be doing well. They all seem to be acting in a productive manner. And I think the chief mentioned we did have a national night out activity at Southwest. And we also are now, Chief, in our 4th week of our community police academy. And that seems to be going well. And I'll turn it back over to Captain Espinoza, but to the Chief, I'll see you at Tolliver soon.
Yeah, thank you, Johnny. And Johnny hit it on point. But just as I mentioned earlier, as far as tangible results, I can see the results in these subcommittees. Just on the homeless subcommittee, right? So the way it works is that community members in their own individual neighborhoods and areas will identify whatever homeless encampment or issue that they're having. They will take photos of that particular encampment or issue, get it to our co-chair, not Johnny, but on the homeless committee, get it to him. He will then call in a service number, grab a service number for that, and then forward that to the appropriate city council staffer who puts that on a priority list. I'm CC'd on that, as well as the senior lead officers, the applicable senior lead officers. And again, that helps my officer, so they're not doing that all day long or having to follow up with that, right? And generally, a city council office will respond. Sometimes when that's not timely, that's when I'll get involved, or the senior lead officer, and we'll prioritize that. And I can say, like 40th in Vermont, we had an officer involved shooting there about 8 months ago. Part of it had to deal with a homeless encampment that was nearby there. Part of this, putting it through the subcommittee and also working, it's also part of our neighborhood engagement area that has since been cleared. We also have issues with homelessness along our freeway underpasses and overpasses along the 10 and the 110 freeways. And we've had a couple of encampments cleaned, and also with individuals taking services, 22nd Street in Budlong over adjacent to the 10 freeway, the 40th overpass along the 110 freeway, and the 43rd overpass along the 110 freeway, where I can send you photos where we've had some large encampments, and they've since been, with our constant attention that our community members have been paying attention to it. We've had those since cleaned up. And again, I get those follow-up photos almost bi-weekly as to what's being done or what's not being done that I need to follow up on. And then when it comes to the fireworks, that's an ongoing issue, as Johnny stated. We've, based on our community members, based on tips that we've had this last 4th of July, we took over 200 pounds of fireworks from the street. And those were tips directly from community members that we could dig our heels into as far as problem locations and have our vice unit go and work undercover. As well as we had 500 pounds worth of confiscation of fireworks based on tips from a couple of our community members on an undercover operation that they did. The location wasn't in Southwest, but where they recovered the fireworks was within South Bureau. And just to go to the traffic subcommittee, Johnny's well aware of that, but we've had a great collaboration with the cruisers. Now there's an understanding and appreciation on both sides. Our community has coordinated some meetings with the cruisers, community members, to identify their concerns. My senior lead did tape some of it and did a great, posted on YouTube, which is very educational for me. And those are just some of the results that we've had from our partnership. And again, we continue to work on that monthly and try to build on that. And I'm especially appreciative of everything that's been done here with our CPAB. And as Johnny said, the benefit, we've lost some of the touch, the in-person meetings, but the benefit to the Zoom meetings is 40 to, I think we've had up to 100 members attend our CPAB sessions via Zoom, so that we can be a force multiplier out there, and we're touching different people. Although we only have 14 active members, we definitely touch a lot of people each and every meeting for here in Southwest and South Bureau. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Decker, am I good?
Can we finish the presentations?
Yeah,
first?
sure. I wasn't trying to interfere with the presentation. Yeah.
Captain Espinoza, could you just first conclude, and then we'll open it up to questions.
And I will conclude with that and take questions.
Well, that's I guess a good prompter from Commissioner Soboroff. But before we open it, I will turn it over to Commissioner Soboroff. But first, I just, on behalf of the entire commission, do want to thank you both, Captain Espinoza and Mr. Rains. Thank you so much for coming today and taking time out of your schedule to join us. But most importantly, thank you for using all of your energies to create positive change in Southwest. And certainly, I think we're all heartened to hear about the boost of involvement. If there's anything good that came out of the pandemic, as you said, Mr. Rains, is that you're able to bring forward more members of the community to join you in these efforts. So thank you for that. Commissioner Soboroff, go ahead, sir.
Okay, that wasn't a prompter. I could have listened. What you guys are doing is wonderful, and I got plenty of time to hear. I do have a question. Johnny, as far as COVID goes and the vaccine or getting people in the community to either, well, in addition to masking, to get their shots, are you guys playing a role in that? Do you have any suggestions for other CPABs or just general suggestions about getting the word out?
One of probably the best resources that we've been able to use is we have a real strong relationship with the neighborhood councils that are in Southwest, and using them as another avenue to get information out to folks about the importance and urgency of getting vaccinated. I think that's a key to include under the umbrella of community activities that CPABs and neighborhood councils work together. I also teach at a Locke High School. I teach a program for African-American males. And my most recent discussions with those students about getting vaccinated, a lot of them following leadership from what's happening in their neighborhood or in their houses that's anti-vaccine. And my statement to them is, you have 12 tattoos on your arm that were all needle pricks. And these were done by someone with no license or anything. Come on now, let's understand. Needles are not inherently bad. You have evidence that you appreciate needlework. And I say that with a little levity, but it has worked. But like I said, collaborations with council offices and neighborhood councils has really helped us in Southwest Division.
Good, thank you, sir.
And Mr. Commissioner and Johnny, this might be a good idea for us. I know part of our plans for the future of our committees and CPAB is to create emergency preparedness. We have a member who's soon to be an official member who's going to be take those reins, but that might be a very good topic for us to take on, Johnny.
Good, thank you, sir.
Commissioner Soboroff, did that conclude your questions?
It did.
Great, thank you. Other questions from commissioners, please? Anything for Commissioner Bonner? Go ahead, sir.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you, Captain, and Mr. Raines. Appreciate you being here with us today. I wanted to ask, these are a couple of questions, most likely for Mr. Raines, if I could. And on your point about the increased participation that you've experienced by offering the virtual opportunity for people, can you describe between both the original landscape, level of participation and also the increased participation, are you able to include or finding that you're getting a meaningful participation from the younger crowd, and whether that's either youth or just the millennials, if you will, and people in that age range? And I'm thinking both in terms of their concerns with the community generally, but also with the two of the three issues that you mentioned, the fireworks and the racing and the streets. Those strike me as issues that involve, likely involve a younger crowd. So to what degree is that demographic participating in some of your conversations?
It's interesting. Prior to COVID, probably the 3 or 4 months, maybe even as much as 6 months prior to the COVID shutdown, we had started using putting our meetings on Facebook. So that had begun to enhance the participation of social media savvy folks, and it's only increased. I'd have to say our demographic has drastically changed. We have a lot more younger people, and who bring a lot of energy to the table. So yeah, to answer your question, it's increased dramatically.
Excellent. So a couple other questions, and let's in light of that, is what is the view, like you mentioned that this is somewhat of a forum for problem solving, that people bring issues there and use that platform to work some things out. If you were thinking about two things, one would be, specifically on the issue of gun violence and shootings, so there's wonder what the conversation has been around that. And then more broadly, the degree to which the issue of over versus under policing. In other words, are you hearing any conversation about either, the community sentiment on having more visibility or less visibility of the police, or how much how much is the CPAB engaged in those kind of issues?
No, okay. Take the second part first. As far as more or less policing, I would have to say that the input that we've gotten from the community with regard to that issue is that our community is not in opposition of the police and the way police do business, as much as they are concerned that lumping all officers into one group. I'll put it this way: as long as the only pool that law enforcement has to draw people from is the human race, you're probably going to get some bad people. I mean, just by the nature of being a human being. But here in Southwest, I think there's a higher level of understanding with regard to issues with police. I think that comes primarily from, we have a long history of having really super strong youth programs. And as Captain can tell you, I've always been an advocate, and I've said this to the chief, I think it actually ought to be a requirement for every officer when they're assigned to a division to spend at least a year working in youth programs, because then they get to know the youth and they get to know the family in a whole different light. That adversarial concept goes away. So I think that's one of the keys. But as I said, in this community, there's not really that much of an adversarial relationship. As far as gun violence, we have within Southwest, I think there's 4 different grid providers, and they play an active role in CPAB. They present to our CPAB audiences on occasion, and getting that information out and getting people to understand the work that intervention folks really do has helped considerably. We haven't had that second shot, as I call it, through help and support of our intervention folks. And they're young enough, a lot of them, that millennials and the other designated groups of folks listen to them when they won't listen to me. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. And CPAB was also instrumental too, Commissioner. Back in late March, early April, we had a gun violence town hall Zoom with close to 100 people. I think there was at least 90 in and out during that time, where we had some guest speakers, both city attorney, district attorney speakers, as well as community activists and community members that were affected by gun violence. We also had to try a small educational component with that. And CPAB was instrumental. It was kind of like an offshoot of one of our regular meetings that we wanted to do something like that, knowing how the beginning of the year, we were already going the wrong direction with gun violence, which is why we scheduled that. And I'd like to do another one before the end of the year and slightly alter some of the speakers, but have something of that. And to your other earlier point, Commissioner Bonner, on the youth, we here at Southwest, and this is all of South Bureau and they've since expanded, we work very closely with building blue bridges, as the original schools were Dorsey High School, Crenshaw High School, Manual Arts, with the kids, the high schoolers from those schools who have, I wouldn't say necessarily an adversarial outlook on police, but definitely, question some of the current things that have been going on, nationally with police, right? And that is all about, again, building those bridges that we need with the kids, right? And what's true, what's not, sitting down with them, having those roundtable talks with them. Johnny, members of our CPAB member, as well as Daphne Bradford, who coordinates that group, have, she was here at our national night out with some of the kids, and some of the success stories of how just some of those meetings have changed some of their perceptions of the police. So I just wanted to throw that in there also, sir.
Appreciate that. I did have one other question, and this is probably again to Mr. Raines, and going, big picture, kind of broadly speaking, and I'm reflecting one on, your personal participation, but also what you described relative to the increased level of participation, the engagement with neighborhood councils, and so on and so forth. And I'm asking you to reflect on that in the context of the concerns that are sometimes expressed about people's, apprehension to cooperate, be seen cooperating with police, or at least even being kind of associated with any conversation involving, the police. So I'm asking, for example, in your personal case, have you do you still have, is that an issue that you've ever confronted and maybe still confront today in terms of people, questioning how close you are to the police and whether you should be engaged that way? And just what is how would you characterize kind of the CPAB and the participant, experience with that set of issues?
Not a small question, huh?
Well, if you, it sounds like you've had some success. So that's the question, is how have you overcome? If you've gotten people to overcome that, it'd be a good thing to understand.
Right. I think one thing that has helped, and it's a very small thing that has helped so much in Southwest, and I guess it was maybe a couple of years ago, when you entered the lobby of Southwest, the first thing you see is photographs of officers. And I think it was Captain Zipperman, when he was at Southwest, said, "We have a CPAB. How about putting the co-chair of CPAB's photograph on the wall as well?" And it's been amazing. I've run into community members when we could go places in the mall or in the grocery store, and they come up to me and say, "You're the community guy whose picture is on the wall. We really like that," to show that, sure, I'm a regular citizen. I was born and raised here in Los Angeles. Have had negative experiences with law enforcement, but as I tell people all the time, there's two ways to approach those issues. You can stand outside the station and yell and scream and throw rocks, or you can be inside and maybe open the door for conversation and to allow other people to come in and express their opinions. So it's worked well being a longtime member of the community. People know me. I have some community respect, and to see myself working hand in hand with law enforcement gives people a different view. And I'm sure Captain will tell you, and past captains will tell you, and the chief as well can tell you, I bit my tongue once, maybe 30 or 40 years ago, and it really hurt. So I promised myself I would never do that again. So I'm not necessarily a cheerleader for one side or the other, for police or the community, but try to get folks to understand we both have responsibilities. We both have a role to play if this thing is going to work. So I'm a champion of what's right and best for the community, and I have been able to communicate that to people, and I have the trust of the community.
Absolutely. And to your point, Commissioner, Johnny and I haven't even always agreed on everything, but we definitely have a great partnership. I've worked at 11 different stations, all of our 4 different bureaus. And the community here in Southwest is probably the most engaging community that I've had of all the stations that I've worked at. And I think, it's here within South Bureau, right? A community of color. And I think that goes to, they want to engage with us as long as we're doing it the right way and they trust what we're doing. And I think they do because of that level of engagement. I think that speaks volumes, and just as similar to what Johnny is saying.
Well, I appreciate that, Captain, your leadership on the issues. And Mr. Raines, I certainly appreciate and respect what you have been doing and what you are doing. And I think I know there's an upcoming CPAB summit. So my hope is that you'll be participating there and we'll have some opportunity to spend some more time.
Oh, thank you. And without a doubt, if I had one ask, I would ask that divisions and this commission utilize the community police advisory boards more. We have a lot to offer. We're an advisory board for the community. There's things that we can provide that are very seldom, if ever, tapped.
I'm sure that's true. And of course, that's one reason that you're with us here this morning is I think we're in our interest is in re-engaging in a way that, or maybe I should say engaging in a way that we have not historically. And it's largely because we have a high degree of confidence in what you just said, that it's a resource that's heretofore untapped. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bonner, have you concluded your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. And certainly well said with respect to the engagement of the CPABs and trying to maximize our connections and our working together on all these issues. Any further questions from members of the commission before we thank our guests Yes. With that, Captain Espinoza, Mr. Rains, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. And more importantly, we do appreciate the work you're doing every single day to engage the community, bring the community closer in working together on public safety. So thank you very much. And Mr. Rains, as Commissioner Bonner said, we look forward to seeing you at the CPAB Summit and continuing this conversation. Thank you both very much. Madam Secretary, if you could excuse our guests and then bring us into closed session, please.
Okay, the Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss agenda items 5A and 5B in accordance with Government Code 54957.
Thank you very much. All right, all the commissioners are now present. We have concluded closed session. Mr. Tiefenk, do a readout of our closed session, please.
Yes, Madam Vice President. Commission has concluded its work in closed session as it relates to item 5A1, officer involved shooting 042-20. The chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted on a 4-0 vote. Those recommendations were tactics, administrative disapproval, 1 Sergeant 2, 1 Sergeant 1, and 1 Police Officer 2. Tactical debrief, 1 Sergeant 1, 1 Police Officer 3, and 4 Police Officer 2s. Drawing and exhibiting in policy, 1 Sergeant 2, 2 Sergeant 2s, 2 Sergeant 1s, and 4 Police Officer 2s. Non-lethal use of force out of policy, administrative disapproval, 1 Police Officer 2 as relates to 4 strikes only. In policy, no further action, 1 Sergeant 1, 1 Police Officer 3, 5 Police Officer 2s. Lethal use of force in policy, no further action, 1 Sergeant 2 and 1 Police Officer 3. As relates to item 5B1, adjudicated. That concludes the report out.
Thank you very much. I'll move that we adjourn. Is there a second to that motion? Moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Very well. We stand adjourned until our next scheduled